Shabbat Shalom. For all of those who come back for the 3 o'clock for the sermon, I will tell you that because of certain technicalities at home, I didn't get to print my sermon out, so I had to email it. Then I'm using my smartphone to do the sermon today. We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Actually, I'm going to have to get this Bible out because I may not be able to read the scriptures that's on this computer. But we're starting in Deuteronomy 23, okay, verse 1. And what I'm doing today, there are several sections of it that I've had to sit down and point out some things that a lot of people don't like. In the world that we live in today, most of it is liberal, very liberal. They just can't fathom the idea of somebody maybe suffering. So they're always looking for an out so that they don't have to keep a commitment that they made. We'll get to that. We start off here in chapter 23 of Deuteronomy, verse 1. He that is wounded in the stones, in the testicles, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. Remember, you can't do a sacrifice of an imperfect animal. And Yahweh here, Moses is pointing out, also includes the individual to go into the temple. We're not talking about modern day going into church services. We're talking about at the time in the temple. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. Because why? Because it was a forbidden union in the first place. It was something that was outside of what Yahweh had instituted for marriage. The congregation shall enter to the congregation of Yahweh even to his 10th generation, meaning 9 generations of his descendants were not allowed. Shall not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. Even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of Yahweh forever. Okay, who are Ammonites and Moabites? The Ammonites and Moabites were the sons of Lot as a result of Lot's incest with his daughters after the destruction of the cities of the plains, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And he goes on, verse 4 of chapter 23.
Dennis?
Yes.
Ammon and Moab are also listed in Psalm 83.
Yeah.
As the part of the confederacy against Israel.
The 10
nations
against Israel. So I mean, you have these things that he's talking about. He's pointing out to them regulations that Yahweh has instituted. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, it's interesting. It says to the 10th generation forever, but after that 10th generation, that forever is that 10th generation, all that up to that.
Up to that point, yes.
Right.
Verse 4, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when you came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against you. Now listen to this. We talked earlier. Balaam, to help Balak, the son of Peor of Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. But also the other aspect is these are your cousins, and they were not ready to welcome you back into the family area. In verse 5, nevertheless, Yahweh your Elohim would not hearken unto Balaam, but Yahweh your Elohim turned the curse into a blessing unto you, because Yahweh your Elohim loved you. You shall not seek their peace, nor their prosperity all the days forever. Now this is where it goes beyond that 10 years. You're not to consider them, well, you're not to wish them prosperity or to even help them. Persons included in the congregation. Verse 7, you shall not abhor an Edomite. Now, why is Ammon and Moabites different than Edomites?
Edom was a brother of Jacob.
Yeah, but they were all relatives to him.
Right.
But it's because of, can you ever think of it? It's possibly because of their birth, how they came into the world. And for he is thy brother, so that makes that same. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you were a stranger in his land. Even here, the Egyptians are regarded better than the Ammonites and the Moabites. The children that are begotten of them shall enter into the congregation of Yahweh in their third generation. These are allowed after the third generation to be both Egyptians and Edomites. It says verse 9, when the host goes forth against your enemies, then keep you from every wicked thing. Well, the other thing here is, you know, how many things happen whereby later on, because of their sins, they lost battles and people died. He says here, when the host goes forth against thine enemies, then keep thee from every wicked thing. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chances upon him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp, and he shall not come within the camp. There was even uncleanness that you had to deal with. And it's listed in the other books. But it shall be, when evening comes on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. You shall have a place also without the camp, whither you shall go forth abroad. And you shall have a paddle upon thy weapon. This is something to carry. Yes, Robert?
Well, the implication is Yahweh's presence.
Yeah,
You see, that's
for uncleanness in the camp.
For uncleanness in camp. So if Yahweh is present, there can be none, so he has to go out.
Right.
Just like with Miriam, she had to go outside.
Yeah, when she had to.
Again, then she could come back. So.
Well, just like the women that once a month had to go out.
So the implication is Yahweh's presence, therefore they're within the camp.
In verse 13, and you shall have a paddle upon your weapon, and it shall be when you will ease yourself abroad, you shall dig therewith, and shall turn back and cover that which comes from thee. This one is, I like my other translation better, that comes from thee. Basically, if you need to go to the bathroom, you need to cover it up. For Yahweh your Elohim walks in the midst of the camp to deliver thee and to give you thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that you see no unclean thing and turn away from thee. Basically, I'm going to have to go back to this thing. We're up to 15. Okay. Oh. I do love my smartphone. It's dumber than me. It goes on and says in 15, you shall not deliver to his master a servant who has escaped from his master to you, for whatever reason. He shall dwell with you among you in the place which he shall choose within one of your gates, where it pleases him best. You shall not oppress him. There shall be no prostitute of the daughters of Israel, neither shall there be a sodomite of the sons of Israel. You shall not bring the hire of a prostitute or the wages of a male prostitute into the house of Yahweh your Elohim for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. Well, a lot of the commentaries talks about here that basically both of these, both of the servant that escaped is more or less a servant that was bound to someone that was of a pagan origin. Those were not allowed to be sent back. Others talk about the fact that the servant was one that was being mistreated by his owner, and until they had a hearing and had a discussion to determine what the problem was, also he couldn't be sent back until, as they said, until the anger of the owner dies down. As for the prostitutes he's talking about here is those like where we ran into with Balaam, where he taught the women that were temple prostitutes to seduce the men of Israel, and how many thousands that died as a result of that sin. Also, that basically he's talking about with this prostitution, nearly all of the pagan religions, basically the women were to prostitute themselves at least once in their lifetime, no matter what. And they had to do service to whichever man came in and put the coin in the till for that particular temple. And basically, it's, again, all of this first part here to me is dealing with things that Yahweh said you shall not do. What I'm talking about, the incest. Lot should never have been near his daughters in any form or fashion. His daughters should never have go to the furthest reaches of deciding that they had to seduce their father, no matter what their reasoning was, because Yahweh could provide no matter what. Then it's talking about, female prostitute, male prostitute. All of that's against Yahweh's law, because it's outside of marriage. Also, for the male prostitute, and even the female prostitute, was that crossing that line of homosexuality. So, going on here, and keep up with this thing. Verse 19, you shall not lend on interest to your brother. Interest of money, interest of food, interest of anything that is lent on interest. Meaning, you're expecting a return of not only the item, but more of, an additional amount of what you lent them in the first place. But, in verse 20, you may lend on interest to a foreigner, but to your brother you shall not lend on interest, that Yahweh your Elohim may bless you in all that you put your hand to, in the land where you go in to possess it. Verse 21, when you vow a vow to Yahweh your Elohim, you shall not be slack to pay it. That means if you make a vow, you better fulfill it. That's why it's best not to make a vow, because if you really follow all of the strictures for a vow in Scripture, you can't fulfill it anyway. One, there's no Levitical priest for you to go to initiate the vow or to end the vow, because you can't make a sacrifice, because that was the last thing required, was a sacrifice to finish off the vow. For Yahweh your Elohim, verse 21, will surely require it of you, and it would be a sin in you. But if you refrain from making a vow, it shall be no sin to you. That's what I was talking about. If you don't make it in the first place, you haven't got anything that you have to try to figure out how to fulfill it. Verse 23, you shall observe and do that which has gone out of your lips. If you're talking about you're going to do something, you need to finish it. We're not talking necessarily just a vow. That means anything else that you say. It's like people that tell your kids, well, I'll get you a car when you turn 18. I promise you I'll get you that car. And you better be ready to get that car. Because you put yourself, you bound yourself to complete an action. It's like telling your kids, I'll take you to Disneyland, or I'll take you to pizza or whatever, and then not do it. I mean, that's one of the things that I found in my life. That is one thing that destroys parental cohesion with their children, is for them to keep telling the children, well, I promise you I'm going to do that. Or I promise you I'll do that. I promise you do that, and never do any of them. Don't make promises you can't keep. He says here, whatever you have vowed to Yahweh your Elohim as a freewill offering, which you have promised with your mouth, you must do. That's when you say, if Yahweh will do this, I'll give you this, or I'll do this for you. You know, people like to make all kinds of vows that they have no intention of doing. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, on verse 24, then you may eat of grapes your field at your own pleasure. But you shall not put any in your container. You can eat what your stomach can hold, that's it. You don't get to take any more than that. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you go through the field of wheat or barley, then you may pluck the ears with your hand, which the disciples did with Yeshua. But you shall not move a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. It means you don't go out there and harvest it. You're to eat what you can do while you're walking through the field. Now here's where I've had a run-in before with people within this, well, we're part of this congregation, is their understanding, or they're trying to use this to justify divorce. Deuteronomy 24:1. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then it shall be, if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of his house. There is no prescription in Scripture for that. There is no law for doing that. But he goes on to explain. When she has departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. If the latter husband hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of the house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her in to be a wife, her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled. For that is an abomination before Yahweh. You shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. Matthew 19:3. This is out of the words out of the mouth of Yeshua. The Pharisees came to him in verse 3 of Matthew 19, testing him and saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? Yeshua is fixing to clarify Deuteronomy 24. He goes in verse 4, he answered, haven't you read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female? Step 1. And said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Step 2. So that they are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore the Father has joined together, let no man tear apart. 3. Very simple. Going on verse 7. They asked him, why then did Moses command us to give her a certificate of divorce and divorce her? Here's the answer. Verse 8, he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it has not been so. So there's never any prescription by Yahweh of divorce. Because see, there was one thing about it. If the wife sinned, say she found another boyfriend, and she sinned, they were taken out and stoned. So there was never any divorce. There was never a problem. Yahweh divorced them. Until death do you part. Going on Matthew 19:9, I tell you that whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, which is what I was talking about, which is the death penalty, and marries another, commits adultery. And he who marries her when she is divorced commits adultery. So that means that the husband and the wife are guilty of divorce, of adultery. Because he made her commit adultery by divorcing her. And he had no rights to divorce her in the first place. Because there's no place in Scripture for divorce. Okay? Then going on, Matthew 24:5, when a man takes a new wife, He shall not go out in the army, neither shall he be assigned any business. He shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer his wife whom he has taken. In other words, they get 1 year of honeymoon. Because what's the purpose here? It's to
Procreate.
exactly for an heir, for the husband, to carry on the family name, to inherit the land. All of this is part of the system. The whole system was based on land. And who got it? When did they get it? How did they get it? And keeping it in the family and keeping it within the tribe. Yes, Bob?
Well, it also gives the man and woman time to become, without pressure from the outside, without a bunch of things that they, like in this age, you got to go work. You got to
Right.
you got to do something. Well, it didn't work that way back then. And if they wanted to plant a garden, or they wanted to go, just travel around or whatever they wanted to do, they could do that in that 1 year before they had to. I would assume that when they got married, they probably had some kind of a what do you call it? The husband gives a
Dowry?
amount or something or other to the groom.
A dowry?
No, yeah, a dowry of some sort.
Dowry that went to the family.
Yeah. In other words, it's
Well,
done decently and in order.
I know in today's society, you got to have love before you can get married. That was not the case here. Do you realize that you can actually marry someone you don't love, and by having this 1 year, have the chance to develop that love between you? Okay? Because, that's the other pressure that comes into all of this. Is there are people that are always trying to bust up a family.
Well, there were arranged marriages sometimes.
Yeah, they were arranged to the point that basically, we can go to an example of Rebecca. All right, got that right? Rebecca, Rachel. I have a niece of Rachel. Anyway, with Rebecca and
Isaac.
Isaac.
Isaac, yes. And you read the story of that, and basically she had no idea who Isaac was. She never met the guy. The servant went to the family. Now the family was the extended family of Isaac's mother. Okay? Found a young lady that was pleasant and personable to be around. The servant determined that she looks like a good candidate. So he goes and talks to her brother, who happens to be the only male left alive, and talks to the family, and they agreed for her to become a wife. Then they asked her, and she agreed. The minute she agreed, Isaac and Rebekah were married in the eyes of Yahweh. Okay? Then they take a camel ride. This is basically an easy story here. They take a camel ride, and when they approach the camp where Isaac was, he's out walking around, and she sees him at a distance. She asks the servant, who is this person? He said, that's your husband. So she gets down off the camel, and everybody wants to make a big deal that she put a veil across her face. Well, that was the custom. It was more or less a courtesy. It's like saying hi. Okay, she put a veil across her face. Well, also she didn't want to scare him off. That's the other part. But anyway, and she goes out and she meets him, and they walk and talk, and then they go into his mother's tent and consummate the marriage. I mean, people would be horrified today if we had that kind of a setup, and yet it worked. Those two loved each other to the day they died. But it doesn't mean that having love starts the deal. You build the love. Because even some of those that so-called love each other, it's still not quite the love you would expect. It's still lust. And it takes time to change that to, and that's part of why he gives them a year. He gives them a year to go from that lust stage to loving stage. Okay? So, I mean, I find it really good. I had 50 plus years of the love stage. She made sure I knew that. No, she was a wonderful wife. Let's see. Verse 6 of Matthew 24, no man shall take the mill or the upper millstone as a pledge, for he takes a life in pledge. Because that's how the man is making his living. You don't take it. He may pledge it, but you don't take it. If a man is found, this is the other good one. If a man is found stealing any of his brothers of the children of Israel, and he deals with him as a slave or sells him, then that thief shall die. You ever think much about the fact of a death penalty for abduction?
About Joseph's brothers.
Yeah, like Joseph's brothers. But that was before this was, I guess you'd say, codified. And maybe that's one of the reasons. You know, a lot of these things deal with what Moses was telling the children of Israel, dealt with all the things that's happened in the generation before. And probably even happened in the early time from Adam and Eve forward, as things came on. You shall remove the evil from among you. Yahweh considered taking somebody as a slave and selling them. And now we're talking about not the type of slave where the person voluntarily entered into a 7-year contract. We're talking about where someone is taken and sold to someone else. Verse 8. Be careful in the plague of leprosy that you observe diligently and do according to all that the priests, the Levites teach you, as I commanded them, so you shall observe to do. One of the things I learned in my biblical Hebrew class was the word leprosy that's used. Nobody really knows exactly what it is. We have ideas of what it is, but it seems to be a term that was used for many different plagues. It just, whatever was out there that was really deadly. You know, we have examples of Miriam with her turning white, skin turning white. We have the, I'm trying to remember the one where they put his hand in, and it came out, it was white, put it back in, it was normal. Moses, okay. Some of this, in my old age, I don't keep up with it as good as I used to. And sometimes when I'm doing my notes, I don't get all the notes in there that I want to get in there, because by the time I think of it and put it to paper, I've forgotten what I was thinking about. Verse 9 of Deuteronomy 24, remember what Yahweh your Elohim did to Miriam, by the way as they came out of Egypt. When you lend your neighbor any kind of loan, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. It means you can't knock on the door, and if they don't answer and they're behind on paying the rent, you don't go in the house to collect the rent. You stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge outside to you. If he is a poor man, you shall not sleep with his pledge. Meaning you don't take something and bring it to your home, and you shall surely restore to him the pledge when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his garment and bless you. It shall be righteousness to you before Yahweh your Elohim. Because one of the things, most of the time, what they pledged was the clothing they wore, the cloak they wore, because they didn't have a whole lot more to bargain with. Verse 14, you shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the foreigners who are in the land within your gates. Because remember, the foreigner was to be treated as though he was an Israelite if he was in the land. Nobody was treated different. There was no discrimination of any kind. Okay? Verse 15, in his day you shall give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down on it, for he is poor and sets his heart on it, lest he cry against you to Yahweh, and it be a sin to you. In other words, if you hire somebody to work for you, when the end of the day comes, you pay them for that day's work. Because in some cases, he really may need it. That may be the only funds he has to eat that evening, or to take care of any other debts that he has. I always found it interesting that I've worked jobs where I got paid once a month. I got jobs that I got paid every other week. And then I had jobs that paid every week, but never on the day in which I completed the job. So when I was hiring people to do this, when I was moving, I paid the people each evening as we finished up. I paid them what I told them I would pay them for that day. And let's put it this way, after the first day, they were standing in line at my front door the next day, and then their friends were standing in line the next day. Because, it's when people need the funds, they need the funds now. They don't need it a week, 2 weeks in the future. It goes on here, says,
And hey, Dennis, they were good workers too.
oh yeah, they became even better workers as each day went by. Says here, verse 16, the fathers shall not be put to death for what the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. That's the father didn't commit it, neither did the child commit it. It's the person who committed it that needs to be punished. Verse 17, you shall not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice, nor take a widow's clothing in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and Yahweh your Elohim redeemed you there. Therefore I command you to do this thing. Well, for the widow, see, the thing was, under Yahweh's law, a woman did not technically own land. It always went to the firstborn son in each generation. That was even the problem that Ruth and Naomi had, because her husband died, then his replacement died, and so when they came back to land, there was still land there that belonged to the tribe. So she had to find someone within the tribe who was free to whom she could marry. Well, initially with trying to think his name, Boaz. Boaz was not the one first in line. There was another one that was in line, but he had a family already and his own kids, and he was afraid that if he married Ruth, he would endanger their inheritance. We'll get into that in a minute because it's going to talk about what she had to do. Goes on here in verse 19. When you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, a bundle of grain that's in the field, you shall not go again to get it. It shall be for the foreigner, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that Yahweh your Elohim may bless you in all the work of your fields. That was the situation with Ruth and Boaz. He put her up to go in and glean behind his servants. Then he went and told the servants to drop a little extra. But you know one thing about it? She was a widow. She worked for everything she got. They didn't come by in the evening and drop off a basket of grain at her house. She worked for it. She earned it. She had possession of it. And I tell you one thing, working for and gaining something is a lot more fun than somebody come by and drop it off. Yes?
Remember when Boaz instructed his servants to leave a little
Extra?
Yeah. So it applies to here when it says if you leave a sheep, you know, in the field, to don't go back and get it.
Get it.
So he was telling them to leave a little extra so
And
she could, as she's working, she'll matter more than just.
And to have something for those that are coming along that need the help, be able to go in there and get it and have the self-respect of having earned it.
Yeah.
Oops, come here. Verse 20, when you beat your olive tree, when you knock off the olives, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the foreigner or the fatherless or the widow. Again, the same aspect of leaving something behind. When you harvest your vineyard, you shall not glean it after yourselves. It shall be for the foreigner, for the fatherless, and for the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. Chapter 25, verse 1. This is commonly called the laws concerning a levirate marriage. We'll get into that because it comes back to not only to Ruth, it also comes back to Tamar and Judah. It says, if there is a controversy, Deuteronomy 25:1, between men, and they come to judgment, and judges judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. It shall be, if the wicked man is worthy to be beaten, that judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face according to his wickedness by number. In other words, it was a prescribed number of strikes. And it was done right there before the judge. You know, found guilty, you take your stripes. And it says, he may sentence him to no more than 40 stripes. He shall not give more, lest if he should give more and beat him more than that many stripes, then your brother will be degraded in your sight, meaning you actually dehumanized him. Verse 4, you shall not muzzle the ox when it treads out the grain. The ox is going to want to eat if it's walking over this grain, because it's hungry just as much as anybody else is, or likes to take a snack every now and then. So you're not to muzzle them. Verse 5, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies, and he has no son, the wife of the dead shall not be married outside to the stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall not succeed in the name of It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother who is dead, that his name not be blotted out of Israel. That was what with the fact with Tamar. Two brothers. She was married to one, and he died. Then has a second brother. Let's see, I think we can get in here. Okay. And then she, as a part of this, took on the second brother. The one thing that I seem to glean from this with the two brothers is that after she gets pregnant and has this child, and Yahweh guaranteed that it would always be a male, that after the child, she got pregnant and had the child, that brother never came near her again. It was just like with Judah. He never came near Tamar after that baby was born. But also, you have the example of where it says that the second brother spilled his seed so there wouldn't be an heir. You can also look at that as the fact that the brother did that because he didn't want to give her up. That he was really in love with her or lustful after her, and as long as she didn't get pregnant, she was his. I mean, that's one other way you can look at it. But Yahweh was trying to guarantee the family lineage to go on. Let's see, verse 7, if a man doesn't want to take his brother's wife, now this is where it came in with Boaz, and I can't remember his relative's name, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him, and if he stands and says, I don't want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, spit in his face. She shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. His name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his shoe removed. You go around, everybody's saying, oh, he's the one that didn't had his shoe removed. And everybody going, well, look at that dummy. But you know, Yahweh had a procedure to be done and to take care of it.
Dennis?
Yes, Curtis?
I don't know why, but somehow this reminds me of in the Gulf War when Sodom was thrown out and they tore down this big statue of his own statue.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the women gathered around, they spat on the statue and they beat on him with their shoe.
Yeah, that's.
Well, one of the insults in the Muslim world is throwing a shoe at somebody.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I was in Israel, and you may remember this, I sat down next to an Arab,
Uh-huh.
and I crossed my legs, and he said, no, don't do that.
Uh-huh.
I said, oh, what? That's your shoe. You don't
Yeah.
show them the bottom of your shoe.
Shoe, yeah.
It's disrespectful.
It's an insult.
So that tradition's come a long way.
Yeah. Chapter 25, verse 11. When men strive against each other, and the wife of one draws near to deliver her husband out of the hand of him who strikes him, and he's losing the battle, and puts out her hand and takes him by his private parts, then you shall cut off her hand. Well, you're possibly interfering with his ability to reproduce. Your eye shall not have pity. Verse 13, you shall not have in your bag diverse weights, one heavy and one light. If you're selling stuff and you're measuring out, you should have a weight that is true. You shall not have in your bag, you shall not have in your house diverse measures, one large and one small. You shall have a perfect and just weight. You shall have a perfect and just measure, that your days may be long in the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. Well, first of all, if you're measuring out something, okay, or you're weighing out something, you didn't make that in the first place. You got that as a result of Yahweh giving it to you. There's not a person in this world that can create a seed that they can then plant and grow or reproduce the plant. They can't make a seed like that. No one can make it because, wait a minute, you say, well, yes, they can. No, because they've got to take things that already exist. They cannot make a seed out of nothing. If you ever really want to look at something, look at the process that just a grain goes through, how it goes through. Because Yahshua talks about take something that has to die. That grain that you put in the ground dies. There is a little part of that grain that will then sprout and grow. It grows through the winter, building up its energy and getting its roots set. And then in the spring, when the weather gets to the point where the nighttime temperature is no less, I should say, it's not low enough to freeze, then that signals that plant to take and push out a shoot that on the end of it is all of these little pockets. They're clear. And you can watch it as it develops and fills in with the starch. It's going to be that makes that grain. And then you'll start seeing that starch start getting cloudy. And it goes through this process of what they call vernalization. And it develops a full head of grain. Then the grain starts getting rid of that extra moisture. It's got the starch in there. That's what you're going to eat. And you have a new grain ahead. Yes, Bob?
That's called a vegetarian resurrection.
Vegetarian resurrection. Oh, Bob, you got me there. Verse 16, for all who do such things, all who do unrighteously, are an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. Remember that Amalek did to you by the way as you came out of Egypt, how he met you by the way and struck the rearmost of you, all who were feeble behind you, who were faint and weary, and he didn't fear Elohim. In other words, he caught the stragglers, just like a predator will on a herd. Those that were kind of straggling behind, those that looked like they were about to fall, because they wouldn't fight too well. And verse 19, therefore it shall be, when Yahweh your Elohim has given you rest from all your enemies all around, in the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you for inheritance to possess it, that you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the sky, you shall not forget. So they've got an instruction of what they're going to have to do. Yes, Curtis?
And they never got around to it, which is why they're in Psalm 83.
They never finished the job. They get to a certain point.
They got to a point, but they never finished the job. That's why they're in Psalm 83.
Yeah. So we get a chance, 83:1. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 1. It shall be, when you have come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you for an inheritance, possess it and dwell it. They did in Joshua, in the book of Joshua, you read about them coming into the land. This is all after Moses completes what all he's talking about here in Deuteronomy. Verse 2, that you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you shall bring in from your land that Yahweh your Elohim gives you. And when they came into the land, it was at the time of Passover. There was grain in the field. All of the people that lived in that area that had these farms, they were inside of Jericho when the wall came tumbling down, and they slaughtered every one of them. So now there's houses and crops and animals and all this out there that Yahweh said he prepared for them, that it would be there, and it was. And then he's telling them what you're to do with the first grain that you cut. You're not allowed to eat any of the grain until you have done the wave sheaf offering. You shall put it in a basket and shall go to the place which Yahweh your Elohim shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. A lot of people don't realize that that's part of the wave sheaf offering. Every person who had property and had a field of grain were to bring grain from that field. They were to put 1 omer, which is about a quart, into a basket before the Levites. Levites take 1 omer out of all of that accumulated and wave it before Yahweh. Then the rest of that grain went to the Levites and their families. And if the fact is at Passover, that is a harvest of the barley. It's ready to be filled. They brought barley with them to the feast. Okay? None of this dealing with barley, whether it be this or that. It was already, if you wait for the correct time of the year, the barley was perfect. Because you're not supposed to bring an imperfect offering to Yahweh. And if you go by what most of them are doing today, when they talk about the barley for deciding the start of the year, look at their display of their pictures. That grain is not fully developed. So they're willing to offer an imperfect sacrifice to Yahweh. Okay? And so they had to bring that. And shall go to the place which Yahweh your Elohim shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. Verse 3. You shall come to the priest who shall be in those days and tell him, I profess today to Yahweh your Elohim that I have come to the land which Yahweh swore to our fathers to give us. The priest shall take the basket out of your hand and set it down before Yahweh your Elohim's altar. You shall answer and say before Yahweh your Elohim, my father was a Syrian ready to perish. He went down to Egypt and lived there, few in number. There he became a great, mighty, populous nation. They're showing where Jacob and them lived before they moved to Egypt. Yes, Curtis?
Just something I found strange about your last comment about the barley.
Mm-hmm.
You ever notice so many of these things today, they're decided by city folks? They're not decided, it's like they don't consult us, country, us redneck Yahoo folks that grew up around this stuff. They don't ask us.
And if you go online and
They come from New York City and the big cities and places like that. They're the religious types that come from these big cities. They're not common country folks like you and me and Bob and Johansson and his family and all them.
But also there's other aspect here. You go out online and you look at what they put up every year for that. They're never consistent as to what they find except
Go.
Okay. Verse 6 of 26. The Egyptians mistreated us, afflicted us, and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried to Yahweh, the Elohim of our fathers. Yahweh heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. Yahweh brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, with great terror, with signs, and with wonders. And he has brought us into this place, and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now behold, I have brought the first of the fruit of the ground which you, Yahweh, hath given me. You shall set it down before Yahweh your Elohim, and worship before Yahweh your Elohim. You shall rejoice in all the good which Yahweh your Elohim has given to you. They did this with grain. They didn't even plant. All they did was do the harvest for it and offer the wave sheaf. Again, going over this, says, you shall, verse 11, shall rejoice in all the good which Yahweh your Elohim has given to you and to your house, you and the Levite and the foreigner who is among you. When you have finished tithing all the tithe of your increase in the third year. This talks about tithing. Tithing is tithing. That law has never been done away with. Which is the year of tithing. Then you shall give it to the Levite, to the foreigner, to the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within your gates and be filled. This is the third year tithe. A third tithe. A tithe that was for the widow and the fatherless and everything, that was given to them. And people say, well, we can't have first, second, third tithe. Yes, you can. We can't do it. Yes, you can. You just have to do it. It's like anything you do in your life. If you decide that you want to add a bathroom to the house, and you'll say, well, I don't have the funds. Well, you figure out a way to get those funds, don't you? You figure out how to save to do it. Yahweh provided that. A tenth goes to the priests and Levites. And then another tenth goes to you for the purpose of going to the feast. And then every third year, there was a third tithe that was set aside for the fathers, widows, and all that to help them have either with the feast, but you were supposed to take them with you to the feast in the first place. This third tithe was basically to help them cover for the next 3 years what they had and what Yahweh offered. He says here, then you shall give it to the Levite, to the foreigner, to the fatherless, and to the widow, that they may eat within your gates and be filled. You shall say before Yahweh your Elohim, I have put away the holy things out of my house, and also have given them to the Levite, to the foreigner, to the fatherless, and to the widow. According to all your commandments which you have commanded me, I have not transgressed any of your commandments, neither have I forgotten them. I have not eaten of it in my mourning. Mourning is, for somebody dead. Neither have I removed any of it while I was unclean, nor given it for the dead. I have listened to the voice of Yahweh my Elohim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look down from your holy habitation from heaven, and bless your people Israel, and the ground which you have given us as you swore to our fathers, and a land flowing with milk and honey. Today Yahweh your Elohim commands you to do these statutes and ordinances. You shall therefore keep and do them with all your heart and with all your soul. You have declared today that Yahweh is your Elohim, and that you would walk in his ways and keep his statutes and his commandments and his ordinances and listen to his voice. Yahweh has declared today that you are a people for his own possession, as he has promised you, and that you should keep all of his commandments. He will make you high among all nations that he has made, in praise, in name, and in honor, that you may be holy people to Yahweh your Elohim, as he has spoken. Well, this thing with tithing. You're giving it to Yahweh. Now, what did Yahweh have it for? It was for the Levites, because they did not have land in which to raise crops and to do all of this on. So, had to feed them, because they did the service of the tabernacle. Well, today you have those that do the service of the congregation. If you don't like the congregation, go somewhere else. But the tithe still belongs to Yahweh and needs to be used to support that purpose. And that's what it's for. And for those that are out there on this recording and all, there are no paid individuals within this congregation. There are none that serve the congregation that are got a salary or anything like that. And that's not what I'm talking about. But it's also what is necessary to support this building, for a place to meet. It's also what supports those that are on the video, on the CD, DVD, and for those that are watch the live streaming. That's how it gets there. None of that comes cheap. It don't take a whole lot of money, but it doesn't come cheap. And all of the assistance that can be given, we're in the process right now. We would like to upgrade how we do the streaming and how we do the videos. Well, that takes money. Some of the systems we looked at so far start out at about $3,000 and go up from there. And that's just for the videoing. And then there's the cost every month of the
CDs, the ink, printer ink, all that stuff.
yeah, all of the CDs, DVDs, the mail, the envelopes, the postage, everything that goes on there. So, you know, if you just take the envelope you get and look at the amount of postage and made a donation for that, it sure would help a lot. We don't make a lot of pleas, but at the same time, people say they like it. Well, put your money where your mouth is. It doesn't take a whole lot of money. I mean, if 100 people put in $1, you got $100. But if only one person puts in $1, you only got $1. So think of that. We don't chase you down and pass the bucket in front of you or anything like that. For those that meet here, we have a box in the back that you can put any kind of donations you want. At the end of the year, we'll send you a receipt that accounts for what we receive from you. Nobody else gets to know about it other than the person that compiles the receipts. Let's see. Live streaming will resume December the 11th. I forgot to look at 2 p.m. I'm sorry, got the
18.
I was trying to edit it on this thing, and I got it at 1 p.m. On December the 11th. Oh, that's when I'll be back. That's when I'll be back. In December. No, that's in January.
January.
Oh, boy. I didn't. I told you I was having to work with all of this. But I'll be back in a month, the second Sabbath in January, if everything's still working in this country. And I look forward to seeing your happy faces. We'll continue on this with Deuteronomy until I finish Deuteronomy, and then we'll have to see where I go from there. Hallelujah, praise Yahweh. Hallelujah, Yahshua.